Welcome back to Bob Pinta at the Wharf. Today was part two of making this medieval looking checkerboard goblet. So in last video I turned the outside of the vessel part and sealed it in an epoxy resin. And in this part what we're going to do is I'll turn the outside. So here I am putting my bowl gouge into my sharpening jig and starting to work on it. So with my bowl gouge I am just starting to shape the outside, and I'm really just drawing with my gouge here. I don't really have a design. Well, I kind of have one where I want it to kind of make points along the way, like that point that you can see at the bottom of the cup. I want a couple of those throughout, but definitely not as big as what's there. I was using that more of a as a separator between the epoxy resin and where I will eventually put wipe-on polyurethane. I like the feel of wipe-on poly. You can actually feel the wood a little bit more, so that's why I will use that at the end. So this is always a cool moment where you start to see the inside pieces poking through, and you start to get, I don't know, I always start to get really excited and start when I can start to see shapes that are inside and they're starting to come out. So at this point, I'll just let you watch this part. In a couple of minutes, there's a moment where I'll start talking again. All right, here's a homemade carbide cutter tool that I made. I really like it, but I'm not as good as I'd like to be with it. With it being that round shape, if I keep it flat, I often will get a catch if I go above the midline because the wood's pushing towards me, so it'll gouge into the wood. And actually, here's a slow-mo of or a normal view of what it looks like in a couple of seconds. I cut out a little bit of the gouging out, but there's the purple heart that you can see starting to poke through there. Here's that tool again, and I really like it as long as, see when I angle it there, as long as I'm cutting on the lower half of it, it's safe. In a couple of minutes, I actually space out for a second and make a mistake. Now, here's a round nose scraper that I'm using to kind of finish it up and get a nice feel on the wood. I'll even every once in a while flip it over and use it as a negative rake scraper there. And here I'm sanding through some of the grits. I think I start at 150 and I go up to 320. Since I'm going to be putting a couple of coats of polyurethane on it, you don't have to go much past 320. So it really gets pretty, and I love how the inside of the purple heart looks when it's in that little, I guess, I don't know what that would be called, a football shape, perhaps. So now I put on a couple of coats of polyurethane. I only show putting on one coat, but I wipe on the poly, let it sit for an hour or so, do a little bit of light sanding and go again. And I'm using that ridge around the bottom of the cup as the separator between the epoxy resin and the wipe-on poly. So here again, I'm just trying to shape it down. At this point, I thought it would be kind of cool if right where I'm starting to cut away, to the right of that, there's like a point where it comes to a peak. I thought that'd be pretty cool. And I really like the shape of that look, and then I was going to make the neck a lot longer from there down. But at this point, I get a little, it gets a little repetitive, and I take this tool out and I start working with it. But like I said before, if you at some point get it, here, I'll just let it play. Oh no! No, 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 no! Oh. Duh. So, there is a catch. It scared the crud out of me, and I thought that I might have lost the ability to turn it back to round, but as you can see, the Purple Heart is actually still solid, so I was able to recenter it, and then I start gouging away at the um, horrible catch that I had right there. Man, that thing scared the heck out of me. So now I just turn this down to round, and I had to go all the way down to the Purple Heart and lose some of the pattern that I was hoping for, but that's what you get when you get a catch. So here's what it looks like so far. From the Purple Heart to the right, I'm pretty much done with. I need to sand it a little bit. Uh, People have asked me how often do I sharpen my gouge, and one thing that I pay attention to is how hard do I have to push. If I have to push at all, it's time to sharpen the gouge. But every once in a while, you'll just be thinking about the shape and the design, and you'll kind of lose track of the fact that you find yourself kind of pushing the gouge into the wood. So that would be my recommendation. If you ever find yourself pushing on the wood, then your tool isn't sharp enough. So at this point, I'm starting to work on getting near the base. I'm not at the base yet. I'm going to do a little bit of decorative kind of pieces here and there, but I'm just stopping it every once in a while to see if I get a color shape that I like. And I really love that bloodwood. It turns really nicely, and when you sand it up, it is beautiful, and it feels really nice to the touch also. So again, this is a moment where a spindle gouge, if I had one, would be really nice. But the man I got the lathe from did not have a spindle gouge, and I just haven't been motivated to buy one yet. So just taking off. So now I'm starting to work on the base. So this part here, it'll come in and be the base. And I just work in from one side, and then work in from the other, and then work in from one side, and work back to the other. Just trying to work that V in there, the little swoop. And I stop the lathe every couple of minutes and check my progress. At this point, I decide that that's the proper size of the cup. That's where I want the cup to be. And I start sanding up through the grits so that that mark that I did with my carbide cutter just marks the bottom of the cup, or the bottom of the base, so I know about where I'm gonna stop. So here I put on a coat of polyurethane. I ended up with 4 coats of polyurethane with sanding in between it. I only have one shown, but that's what it ends up looking like. So I put some wipe on poly, I wait, and then I wipe it off about 8 to 10 minutes later. If there's any residual, wait a little while, sand, and rinse and repeat. So here's what it looks like with the fresh last coat of polyurethane on there before I go back to part it off. And here's what it looks like all parted off. If you have any comments or thoughts, let me know, and I hope you enjoyed the video.